This conference will now be recorded.
I'd like to thank you all out today on strategies using PLP products. Today we have Eric Williams. He is, for the last 4 years, has been a territory sales manager for S&S Solutions. I've had the pleasure to work with him directly for a couple of years now. He's up in the Northwest, and besides that, he is also one of our trainers. Before coming to S&S, Eric was with Ericsson as a quality assurance manager and moved over to project management. Overall, he has 15 plus years of experience in the industry and has a wide range of area of knowledge dealing with fiber testing, fiber installation, wireless Ethernet testing. So without further ado, I will transfer it over to Eric.
Hey, thanks, Charlie. If everyone can hear me okay. If we mentioned earlier muting, since we have a smaller group today, and kind of the original idea for this format was to kind of have a roundtable discussion with some of our customers that have brought up questions about some of the closures that PLP manufacturers that maybe are kind of outside of the wheelhouse that maybe you think of preformed line products, typically our dome closures and high count and backbone. But I wanted to look at, we've strategies around the different closures and different types for these kind of newer projects or new generation projects, mainly fiber to the home. And we've had a number of customers looking for alternatives to an MSP, looking at different ways of deploying their fiber to the home network. And basically what I wanted to do today was go over some of the other categories of closures within PLP's line, take a look at some of the specifications on those, and then discuss with you guys any questions that you may have regarding those specific closures. Now, if you are calling in, you're going to be at a significant disadvantage because we're going to be looking at, I'm going to be sharing my screen and kind of looking at the closures and speaking about them specifically. If you have a camera available and you feel like participating, please turn on your camera, and we'll have some kind of back and forth if you have specific questions on some of the closures. So let me go ahead and get started by sharing my screen here. All right. So we want to talk about different deployment strategies using the Coyote fiber optic closures. Some of the, like I said, more the esoteric closures or some that you may not be as familiar with. I wanted to review and give you some alternatives and different ways that we approach that. So probably the most attention that we've received for fiber to the home products is with our drop terminal closures. And you can see here I'm mainly looking at the DTC8. This is a butt splice style closure. We do have a DTC4 and a DTC6 as well, which I'll review quickly. But those are more of a specific application, inline applications, MDU applications. They're great for fiber drops. I think the case that we've seen the most interest in is the DTC8. It does allow a couple different options within that case, which I'll kind of go over with you guys here. So first thing I wanted to draw attention to, let me bring up this case, is kind of a couple different strategies that we use the case. And kind of features around the case. So this is an overmolded with a hinge collar system. It does have an in-plate bracket, and it does utilize the Coyote silicon grommets. Now, there are a couple options with the types of trays and configurations that you can use with the DTC8, and it's important to know there's really three options, main options that folks use, and then there's a fourth as well. But we really are looking at splice only closure. So if you wanted to do just straight splices, you can manage the fiber below on the closure and then bring all your splices up into these splice trays here that are available. We have introduced a 1x8 or a splice tray that will take a 1x8 bare fiber splitter, or also accepts a 1x2 and 1x4. And then you can actually get the pre-connectorized splitters. They will fit in this little splice holder as well. You notice that this splice tray is a little bit thicker than our standard splice tray, so it is there to accommodate splitters. So for a PON network or a cascaded PON network, you can utilize this tray and place your splitter right in the case. So I've seen a lot of interest around that because it does give you that cascaded PON. Maybe you have your initial splitter in a fiber cabinet or in a larger dome closure, and then beyond that, on your drop cases, you need to split out. Maybe you bring one fiber in and split out 8 from that one fiber. You would have the 8 drops. Now you can see these two configurations are mainly either splice only or the with a different tray storage on the bottom. We also have this tray. There we go. We also have it with the protected storage system, and then probably the most popular is the with the splice or bulkhead adapters. So you can have both the splice trays and the slack storage, and there's the bulkhead adapters. Those adapters are available in SC and LC in both APC and UPC. So if you and then the fourth option, which I don't see a whole lot of utilization, I see mainly the splice and adapters. The adapter only option, which doesn't really give you a whole lot of additional slack storage, just kind of below where the adapters are. And if you just wanted to splice straight into your SCAPC or whatever solid adapters, this does give you more adapter space than the splice and adapter storage. Typically with the splice and adapter storage, you're going to have, let's see if there's a good, I don't have a very good photo of that, but you have 8 adapters coming out of there, and then space for 8 drops. I see this case regularly mounted or as an option in a pedestal. If you are using it in an aerial capacity, we do have an aerial mounting bracket. And then there's actually a really great DTCA cable storage system that can be mounted on a pole if you're utilizing that type of setup. So it's a pretty versatile case. The one thing that I definitely always like to remind folks of with these types of closures is that Preformed Line Products is not a cable manufacturer. So a lot of the design principles around building these fiber optic cases is so that we can utilize any type of cable. So in this illustration, you can see where we have a round, 48 pair or 48 fiber cable, just as an example coming in, but we're utilizing flat drop for all of our drop cables. So, and we have grommets that are available for various size cables. Now, with that in mind, when you're ordering any preformed product, one of the primary things that we ask about when ordering or selecting the product is the cables, the number of cables that are coming in and out of the case, and then also the cable diameters. So on the ordering instructions, you can see that there's even a section for one set of cables, and then a section for the additional set of cables. Section 1 is primarily going to be your distribution cable, and section 2 is going to be all of your drop cables. You can see those grommets are considerably smaller. One thing to note with these, I have some customers order the solid plugs. Any of the plugs that you order that have the blank insert in them will basically serve as a solid plug, but it does give you the option of using that specific drop grommet. You can see on the ordering sheet here too, there's the 4 different options I discussed: splice only, splice and adapters, and then the splice only with open storage, or adapters only. What we see primarily is option 2 and some splice only with the protected storage, but generally the splice with adapters gives you the most options. And then you can order this guy with 4 trays, the additional SC or LC adapter types, pigtails if needed, and then this accessory box here will show you where you can order the part number for the splitter tray specifically, or the various mounting brackets. So like I say, I think this is probably one of the more popular alternatives to, say, like an OFDC. It does, depending on the configuration, give you a little bit more room inside the splice closure for managing your drops. And then there's also a really, it's a good kind of a, let's see if I can give you a good illustration of it. This flat drop retention bracket is very important, and because it does allow, there's a little V-shaped clip here that allows us to insert a flat drop and keep it in that vertical orientation. So it's very important to have the, make sure that you are getting the flat drop retention bracket if you're going to be working with flat drops. Otherwise, that cable will not be able to stay in the vertical orientation. Along in that same category is the drop termination closure for the 4 ports and drop termination closure for 6 ports. And you get the same basic options as the DTC8, but you can see this is in more of an inline orientation. The DTC4 would be probably primarily best suited for an MDU application or somewhere we're using microduct. There it does come with, in one of the 4 ports, a large silicon grommet that is has a diameter for a microduct, and then it has an additional 6 drop grommets or drop holes for getting drops out of that closure if necessary. But you can see like a window cut or a microduct cut, and installing this closure around that duct to drop off a fiber, or to do a butt splice within the duct or within the MDU is probably going to be one of your better options for the DTC4. The DTC6 gives you a little bit more options in that, oops, excuse me there. It does have 6 ports, and they're all of the standard square size rather than the large grommet. So you can have your flat drop coming in and going out, or a round hole or a round cable for distribution. You can splice or drop off your splitter tray, or drop off 4 to 8 drops here if needed, and you have the grommets in either direction. I see this is a great design. I love the clamshell aspect of it, but the placement of this closure is going to be very specific, being that it is inline. You can build it in a butt splice or a butt type of orientation. We're only using 3 of the ports, but that does kind of leave you with 3 unused ports. So if you're looking at that type of application, I would definitely consider the DTC8 over the DTC6. But if you're doing something along the lines of a MDU, or if you have like a small cell application, this is where this DTC6 really shines. You can see for the demarcation between the outside plant and the fiber that serves this remote radio unit. This is going to be really easy for technicians to get into, being that it's a clamshell design, and then just add their fiber jumper over to their RRU. So like I said, we see this application being probably the most popular for the DTC6. So, have anyone on this call have any experience with the DTC 6 or the DTC 8, or have any specific questions about either of those cases? You can feel free to use the chat window as well. All right, if there's nothing specific on the DTC series, we'll take a look at the aerial termination closure. Now, there's still quite a bit of aerial plant or folks that are installing aerial plant out there, and this is a case that's designed specifically for that application. It is different from the drop termination closure in that it is free breathing. It is not a hermetically sealed case, and it is designed for above ground level. So keep that in mind. These will not work very well for you in a handhole or below grade. The real beauty of the ATC, and one of the things that I think is most important, the neatest thing about it, is that it has a dual chamber design. So and this is kind of where I start discussing deployment strategies with our carriers and with customers that are utilizing these cases in the field. If you have separated or segmented your workforce into, say, splice crews and drop termination, fiber to the home or last mile technicians, this is going to be a great case to be able to have your crew that does all the splicing come in and splice through their cable, and essentially they just drop off the number of drops into the drop chamber side. So you can order this with the with the pigtails there available, and or pre-connected pigtails, and then the number of drops as well. But what I really like about this is that once you have created that, done all the build out on the case itself, and you close up this splice chamber, once that's completed, you really have kind of, almost created a demarcation between those two segmented, work crews, the splicers that are going to be out there doing that initial build of the distribution. And then if guys are coming in behind them, maybe they're in your workforce. I see a lot of times that they're subcontracted or maybe contracted out for the last mile portion. And so you would be able to come in on the drop chamber side and basically open up the chamber using a pre-connectorized drop. You just place it into one of our grommets here, connect it to that port, and then manage the drop through this retention strap here. But pretty simple to get in and out of. It does give you quite a bit of room inside the case. Gotten some feedback. We'd love to see the chamber open down, but that does present a little bit of difficulty in how we would be able to access these grommets, and also there's always some question about weatherproofing if we've got a case that opens, kind of creating like a seal almost, or a cup. So generally, I think it's going to be a better design to have this case open to the top here. It does have a nice little kickstand to keep it open, so you're not constantly dealing with the lid there. And yeah, like I said, it does keep that nice segmented and segregated between the splicers and the last mile technician. So definitely a case that we've seen a lot of popularity. Same type of concept when ordering this case with a drop termination closure. We're going to determine the cables that are coming in to the splice chamber side. So that may be significantly different if you're using, say, an armored cable, or a double armored or double jacketed cable, or what have you. You're going to have a larger diameter. And then, of course, in the splice chamber side, the splice chamber side will have a larger diameter, and then the drop cable side is going to have grommets that are going to be much smaller. there is a specific flat drop grommet if you're going to be utilizing flat drop. Honestly, I see the best deployment with this type of case is utilizing maybe a single-ended round drop cable. I've seen a lot of success with that. We do have the aerial mounting kit for ADSS. It does come with the standard mounting kit for strand. SC APC, SE UPC, and LC APC or UPC are available as the drop chamber adapter types. Anytime you go with LC, you can pretty much double up the number of drops available there. So, like I said, this is the case that we steer folks toward if they're going to be doing aerial applications. I think that it does make for a great deployment strategy, being able to segment out all your workforce, and also you don't have to worry about any finger pointing of like so and so touched the splice or blah blah blah. So great case for those aerial applications. Has anyone had any specific experience with the ATC? And we've got some friends down at Hunter Communications that are using quite a bit of these. Do we have anyone on from Hunter? I don't see any names I recognize. So any questions on the ATC specifically? All right. Could please mute your phone. There we go. That helped out a little bit. Sorry about that little interruption there. So the next series of cases that I wanted to talk about is one that I don't see. I see some interest and some deployment in. I haven't seen a tremendous amount. The first one's going to be our Cross Connect series. I see some really interesting ways of utilizing this case, and I'll discuss those briefly, a couple things that we've seen. But essentially, this is kind of like taking a fiber cabinet and condensing it down to a space that would fit into a handhole. Now, that sounds like we're densifying things, but depending on the number of drops or the number of terminations that you need to make, we would recommend going up in size for those cases. Obviously, it's going to give you more ports on the segmented end plate, along with more tray capacity and more terminations as well. So let's take a closer look at the terminal, the cross connect closures. Oh, actually, I think I had the terminal closures next. I apologize. We'll look at these guys. So terminal closures are a great alternative to an MSP because we're essentially using the same OptiTap on either a single chamber or a dual chamber configuration. You build the case with the number, or you order the case and build it with the number of terminations that you need. We'll take a look at these guys in a little more detail. So as with all of the other Coyote fiber optic closures, we're utilizing the Grommet system with a segmented end plate. On our terminal closures, we essentially take the inline runt and change the lid and give it, in some of the internal parts, and give it that capability of adding an OptiTap adapter. There are plug ports if you're not going to use all of those adapters, and you can install those OptiTap adapters as needed or remove them. The thing that I really like about this case over, say, an MST or something along those lines is if I've got a failing port, it's pretty easy for me to get back into this case and either resplice that pigtail on or actually pull that connector out from the terminal to clean it or inspect it, or I guess you can inspect it through the OptiTap if you have an OptiTap tip for your scope. But I find that rarely happens, or when it does, sometimes it's difficult to get that scope lined up and view the end of the fiber. So you can open up the case and get into the connector from the backside for replacement or repair if needed. So that to me is a huge benefit. I like the idea of being able to fix my issues and address them directly rather than just replacing things. So that's one of the big areas that I see an advantage on the terminal closures. With our deep profile trays, you can utilize our pre-connectorized splitters, and it's basically the same width as a ribbon there when using the light grip one hole retention sleeve. And as you can see, there's a number of different chamber cover options for the single chamber. You can do a 6-port, a 9-port, or a 12-port. And like I said, any of those adapters can be closed, or you can add an OptiTap adapter with our tool. The dual chamber terminal closure gives us an additional splice capacity as well as the tray capacity. So if you have a scenario where you need that additional capacity, you're going to be looking at roughly the same options, but you have a splice chamber and a termination chamber. So you can have, well, I guess on either side, you can have a 9-port terminal closure, a 24-port terminal closure, or that direct splice / cross connect style. The great thing about all of the inline runts is we really have one tray width and tray size. It's just going to be the depth that's going to change. So either a low profile or a deep profile, depending on whether we're doing single fusion or mass fusion, or if you've got some splitters that you're going to be utilizing, you can use different options for the different trays. There's our OptiTap adapter that you can order separately, along with the installation tool or port plug. So going back to that original idea is that this is a great replacement if you are using the MST or the OptiTap drops. If you prefer that type of scenario, which does make it very convenient for deployment, but you want a different type of closure for your terminations, we would recommend the Coyote terminal closure. If you're bringing in quite a bit more fiber and you are needing to drop off and you want to use that terminal, you can look at the terminal dome, which is a, there we go. Oh. Yeah, so the terminal domes basically are same dome design, segmented end plate, but we've added an OptiTap terminal into that end plate. We'll take a closer look at that as well. So the beauty and the biggest advantage to the preformed domes is the segmented end plate. And the real advantage that you have is being able to access the cables independently if you're adding or removing cables. In our dome closures, you can also really upgrade from one closure to the next if you need to add ports. Now, it's a little different here for the terminal domes. Basically, we have that segmented end plate, but then we've also added those port plugs or adapters. So in the 6.5 size, we're going to have options for up to 4 OptiTap terminals. And in the 9.5 size, you're going to have options for up to 8 of the OptiTap terminals. Do have grounding studs as well for each of these, and of course the air valve there. So as with any of the ordering, as we've already stated, we focus primarily on the cable size and the in and out, so we can make sure that we match that up with the correct grommets. Now, one thing that I always like to remind folks of when they are looking at Coyote closures, generally in the initial kit, depending on the size of the closure, you're going to have it come with silicon grommets that work with cables that would match up to that fiber capacity of that specific case. So generally, like with the 6.5, you're going to see grommets for .40 to .60 and .60 to .85. And with the 9.5, they come with the .60 to .85 and .85 to 1.0. Now you can see we have a variety of additional grommets if you wanted to. I believe actually like the Coyote 1 dome also comes with a 6-hole drop with a single hole grommet in the center too. It's a very popular grommet. So back to any of the ordering applications, we're going to be looking at the actual cable sizes that are coming in and coming out. Of course, we can add those OptiTap adapters, and you can use your drop cables that you're accustomed to with this dome closure. Same splice trays that we're using on any of the other domes or the runts, so we can lower the number of SKUs that you have by utilizing all of the same short splice tray, deep profile, or what have you. And then the terminal dome is available in the 6.5 by 17, the 9.5 by 19, and then of course the larger sizes in the 6.5 22 and the 9.5 28. The input's going to be the same. However, there is going to be a lowered number of we'll see here, ports on the 9.5 and the 6.5 to make room for those OptiTap terminals. So another great alternative if you're using OptiTap type drops and you want to be able to utilize that system. So, you know, of course, we can add ports or plugs or what have you. Any of these domes can be mounted aerial on a pole. We also have some other slack storage mounting applications as well. But kind of a neat application when we're taking this terminal concept and adding it to our domes. I don't see this type of design from some of our other manufacturers. So it does give you some options if you are having to have a large splice capacity, but you still want to drop off, do some drops out of that same closure, say in a rural environment. I think this is a good setup. The extension from that terminal domes and what have you is going to be our ground level closures. And this is a pretty unique system. I can see the use case for it being pretty nice. You get a whole package here with the ground level closure. And essentially what we've done here is taking the same dome closure, segmented in plate, which we've discussed some of the advantages there, and we are allowing that to be oriented in a kind of I guess that vertical orientation, so that it is essentially a pedestal. The beauty of this small base or this guy is it's a hermetically sealed pedestal, which I know a lot of folks seem to think that pedestals are magnets for automobiles and what have you, so that they shy away from them. However, if you are going to be utilizing pedestals in a neighborhood or something along those lines, this is a good alternative, because rather than putting a hermetically sealed case inside of that pedestal, why not utilize all of the space inside of it and then just have the pedestal be a dome? So that's basically what we have done with this this closure design. There is a base that comes with it, there is a platform, and then we have that hermetically sealed end plate that will lock into the base. You can get it with a couple different sized let's see here. That's what I was looking for. Get a couple different base sizes. There's a large base with a cover and a plug. You can get a small base and a small base with the cover, or you can use your own handhold as long as it works with our base cover and the plug. So you can order those separately as well. So pretty neat idea here. I really would love to see this deployed because I think it makes a good use of that space of that pedestal if you're going to be utilizing pedestals. So that's the ground level dome or ground level closure, dome closure, and those are available in 6.5, 22, or excuse me, 9.5, 17, and 9.5, 28. So they're the larger end plate sizes with the 7 ports. Let's see here. Any questions on the ground level closure or on any of the terminal closures that we were discussing there? All right, and then don't think I had it up. Give me just one moment here. Need to bring up our cross connect closures. Oh, thought I had it right there. But we'll kind of take a look at them in this capacity then. So with the cross connect closure, you have the option of including that, like I was saying before, a fiber hut inside of the closure. You can set these up with a couple different options for either the 1 dome, the 6.5 17, the 6.5 22, or the 9.5 19. And depending on the size of the closure, that will determine the number of drops or cross connect terminations that you can make. I've seen customers utilize this particular design as a transition point between, say, maybe they're going to do a PON network that they then later want to convert to a point-to-point network. You can insert or place all of your cables in this dome, set up your cross connect, and as your neighborhood or as your take rate increases, you basically just provide a drop to that particular customer. And then if you get a specific, get up to a point where either that splitter is expiring or you have enough customers to justify a point-to-point network there, you can take that same closure, same end plate, and basically swap out the internals for our standard dome closure and straight splice everything. So it allows you to kind of make that transition with the same handhole size without having to be concerned with adding a new dome or adding a new closure. So it just gives you some options if you're combining this with that the modularity aspect of the end plate. I think that you can kind of let your imagination run wild with possibilities of swapping out the portions as needed. So definitely gives you some options there if you're looking at deploying, especially PON networks. I think that's definitely a good option. So that was primarily what I wanted to cover today. Jonathan, thanks for turning the camera on. Did you have any questions, sir?
No, actually, that's pretty much what was really helpful for us. We're trying to look at some different designs with our, especially with our underground design. We've been in the past, we never really used a pedestal design at all. We usually use handholds with B or D enclosures. So we're trying to move into that splice enclosure so that the ground level enclosure just kind of shows almost like a pull box in a way with a pedestal on top to sit a little higher, something that we've been kind of looking into. So that's pretty helpful to look at. I'll have to look into more in the future here soon.
Yeah, the purpose I wanted to get across with you guys today is just basically, there's a, we kind of a lot of times focus on the dome closures within PLP's line. It's kind of been the tried and true for deploying your backbone network, but there's a lot of other options out there within the line that I think are definitely worth taking a look at. I definitely like the ground level closure, and really what we intended this discussion was just kind of a more of a roundtable discussion with you folks that might have questions about some of these closures you haven't seen before, or maybe ways that you have deployed them directly. But I wanted to kind of give you an idea of what else is out there. If you're, like I said, if you're using the pedestals, I really like the ground level closure. They are a little costlier alone, but if you consider that with the handhole and the base and everything all together, and the fact that you got it hermetically sealed rather than just being an open pedestal, I think it's a good package. Right. The other thing that's really beautiful about these that you might not do with your standard pedestal is when you disconnect the GLC, you can have all of your slack in this in your hole, so you can actually pull that whole entire, what would be the pedestal, the whole entire piece out into your splice trailer, and just pull that dome cover off, because it's essentially a dome
right.
that is on the pedestal. So it's pretty neat that way. Yeah, thanks.
That's what's kind of interesting for us. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just saying, thanks for the input.
No, thank you guys. I would say that was the one piece I actually wanted to see if you guys had anything for, because again, we use the hand tools with beam closures for our fiber to the home projects beforehand. Now it became extremely pricey. It's getting, between the hand tool and the beam closure itself, between $550 and $600 fiber to home projects for just between a couple of homes, which is not exactly cost effective. Our cost per homes passed was getting a little high for ourselves to be able to kind of justify some of these rural / urban builds that we're doing. So we are in Western Colorado, so we have a mixture of that, the 1 or 2 homes per square mile. Then you have some subdivisions that have 90 to 100 homes. So it'd be nice to see if we can kind of start using that kind of design, because we are starting to go towards the pedestal pull box design side of subdivisions. So the fact that our fiber network designers are a little bit worried about pedestals, as you said, because they seem to think it's the pedestals are super attracted to automobiles, and we can take off 2 or 3, 4 homes. Maybe right now, we're actually maybe thinking about going to about 8 homes for a pedestal, depending on the enclosure we have in there. But have 8 homes being taken out by one person, be driving over it and having to go back in there and repair it over a day or two. So that's something that we look into, just because I wouldn't say it's going to not attract automobiles by chance, but it might be able to give us a bigger base. And no one can just take it off the top and look at it since it's hermetically sealed. So
yeah, that's a big part of it too. I can't tell you how easy it is to get into a pedestal. But the other option you may want to take a look at or consider is that 6.5/22 cross connect closure, because you're going to be able to get a number of terminations out of that, but you can still take that whole dome and put it into your handhold below grade. So it's kind of like I kind of think of it as like a fiber hut in a dome, because you have that cross connect where you can populate all of those ports. I know a lot of folks get a little squeamish around having connectors. I feel personally that's a little bit of an old school coming into the new school. That straight splice is always going to be the best connection point. However, a lot of that mentality came from older style connectors, which did have high loss and high reflection. If you're looking at an SC APC connector, you can, if it's clean and connected properly, an OTDR will regularly mistake it for a higher loss splice, or even a regular splice for that matter, because if you're looking at up to neg 75 dB on reflection, which is basically nothing. So you're really just concerned with the splice loss. So if we're using best practices like, clean scope. Here it's on my T-shirt here on the back. Scope, clean scope. So using those APC connectors, I don't think is going to really induce that much loss, especially at that far end of the network where you're kind of doing that final connection to a drop to the house. So another consideration if you're looking at kind of where to put those dome closures. I think a 6.5 22 is roughly about the same length as a B, but you can get quite a bit more fiber in there, and even if you're doing it with a terminal, you can get quite a bit as well. Also, the real beauty of that 6.5 22 versus say a B size closure is that with the segmented end plate, I can still get to that splice case or splice tray and move it in and out of the case independently. Whereas on that B closure size, the splice tray is too large to get in and out of that top hat. So if you ever update from a B to the next size, you're going to have to reburn everything or move it all into a new tray.
Right.
Or I see a lot of, what do they call it, guys, where they take a jumper out of one case into the next case, which is a solution, but I think Preformed offers a better option with just being able to upgrade the entire case. So definitely some things to consider.
I appreciate that. But definitely have to take a look more into. I'll probably share this recording and with our team who's a little more. I'm more of an OSP engineer than I am with the actual with splicing in our network design. But I like to at least show them what they think about that, because it is something that we even thinking about. We're trying to obviously be more cost effective. But at the same time, we're also looking into the fact that some of our older designs of our fiber network are much lower count fiber and everything, so we have to upgrade everything. So that would be a way we can kind of look into some cost savings, is instead of only just using beam enclosures everywhere with our hand tools, maybe looking into some of these 6.5 22 enclosures with terminals and everything.
Yeah, let's see. I'm gonna bring up this guy with the segmented. The other consideration with Preformed, and this has kind of been our main kind of discussion point, is it's not when you are going to overlay or add fibers, or not if, but when. And when that happens, the old mentality of design is that we would just add a case, or that we're never going to need more fiber, because really what it came down to, we'll never need more fiber. Well, now, the trend is to put as much fiber in as we can, whether we need it or not. And honestly, that's where this segmented end plate and this modularity helps future-proof that network. When it's, and my goal has been to get technicians that have to actually maintain the network and deal with these things, outside plant engineers and outside plant managers, kind of all on the same page about like the decisions that are made from a design standpoint carry off down into like the technicians actually have to maintain it. So if we give the technicians more options, then they're going to do a better job of maintaining the network. So definitely take a good look at the LP's stuff, and we'll send out a nice package of some spec sheets along with the this recording. So
Good.
Any other questions?
Eric, I have a question. This is Sandra from Comstar Supply. How are you? Your current lead times on your closures, what are they? And are you seeing them start to slip out due to resin issues? Or did you already talk about that? I'm sorry if I missed it.
No, I didn't really speak on lead times. I'm not really going to be the authority for that. I'm kind of more of a technical pre-sales resource for you guys. The best way to get the most up-to-date lead times is to request a quote, or and even when you request a quote, between the time you request the quote and the time you make the order, those lead times could fluctuate. I will say that it is much dependent on the particular product, and how much it's being utilized. And as with everyone on the planet right now that I've heard of, everyone's kind of experiencing some raw materials shortages or difficulty acquiring raw materials. So we've even seen, some cases that may have more metal, because acquiring the zinc or the stainless has become, we're a year into the pandemic, so things are starting to slowly slide to that direction. So those cases may have longer lead times because of certain materials, and it's really, raw materials. Most of PLP's, all of PLP's products are manufactured in the U.S., but those raw materials are sourced from everywhere. So hell, even like having a ship stuck in the Suez Canal is having a global impact on everybody's ability
Yeah.
to make this stuff. So, I know that the pandemic didn't really impact manufacturing on a huge bit with Preform. They did reduce the number of shifts, I think, and to try to, for worker safety, but they've gotten back to full production, is my understanding. But where the lead times are, it's product dependent, and it changes from day to day. Quite honestly, I wish it could be a better resource for you, Sandra.
All right, I'll reach out and see what I can get, but thank you.
Yeah, Aaron will probably be the end all be all for what's available.
All right, gotcha. Thanks.
Any other questions on the cases specifically, or anything along those lines? Any experiences with any of the different options that we have? Well, if there's nothing else that we can cover today, I'll brings me to a close. We really appreciate you guys joining. If you have any questions on any of the Preformed Line Products line of closures, whether it be our standard domes or drop termination closures, or anything that we've looked at today, feel free to reach out to anyone at S&S. We can put you in the right place or answer your question directly. So thanks for joining, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We'll get this recording out to you and some of those specs. I can add, this is Charlie at S&S, I can add a little bit to that lead time just to give you an idea. Our standard 6.5 by 22 dome right now, estimated lead time is about a week. But if you're looking at a GLC, you're looking at 4 to 5 weeks. So like Eric said, it does kind of depend on the product and the quantity of what they're looking at. They are working as fast as they can to get shipments out in a timely manner.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Thank you for everyone's time.